Part of my ministry in Dayton, Ohio, was a time spent at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. It was a very small and faithful community whose building was actually in the heart of the hood. And because of its location, it became a hub of ministry for the other churches in the Dayton Deanery. And our first joint initiative was to collaborate on a food pantry that was actually being run out of St. Andrews by another congregation who could no longer sustain their ministry. So when a group of volunteers and I went to visit the pantry in operation to see how it was going, the first thing we noticed was that those needing food were made to wait out in the parking lot until exactly 9 o'clock when the doors were opened. And there ensued scrambling to get in line and a couple of scuffles and argument about who was there first. And then the only thing I could think of was it was a lot like going in to get your driver's license. Because everybody was directed to one station to complete a form and show proof of address, and then they had to stand in a second line while someone else went in and got them their allotted food. And I was actually curious to see if they'd be fingerprinted at some point. But then once they received their groceries, they were ushered out through another door while being reminded that they could only come in once a month. Now, I did not know the first thing about running a food pantry, but I knew right away that if we were going to be successful, we needed to figure out another way to do this. So together, a small group of volunteers and I, we began to plan and to pray and to vision. And so when we opened the doors for the first time as the Dayton Deanery Food Pantry, this is what it was like. We got there early and we served coffee and we invited people to come inside and sit until we were ready. And at the appointed time, I gathered everyone's attention, welcomed them, and I thanked them for coming. I said that we were grateful for their presence because they were offering us an opportunity to live out our faith. We didn't yell at them, and we did not shove bags of food in their arms. And we had a group of young volunteers there to help those who needed it out to their cars, and they would put groceries in the trunks or the back seats. And you know what? We noticed over time that there were no more scuffles in the parking lot before the doors opened, no cuts, and very few people actually tried to take advantage of our generosity. And I believe that's because we offered people much more than food. We also offered them a little dignity. This example of how ministry can be both transformed and transformative is an important part of the message in St. Paul's letter to the congregation in Corinth that we might not hear at first. He's inviting this affluent congregation to fulfill an earlier promise they made to help out a poor church, probably in Jerusalem. Because we live in a culture that places high value on the accumulation of wealth, it's the obvious message of Paul's letter that jumps out for most of us, that monetary bottom line of this fair balance between abundance and need. It is all too easy to recognize what too little is like. We all know when people don't have enough. It's that concept of too much that is the one we seem to struggle with. But I'll tell you, the most recent wealth calculator tells us that if we make about $75,000 annually, which according to the happiness researchers is the tipping point, which means when you have more than that, it really doesn't make you any happier, that we are easily in the top 1% of the richest people in the world. But at the end of the day, for each of us, arriving at what enough is an individual decision. And my experience in ministry tells me that as individuals or congregations, the more we have, the more difficult it becomes. But what I really wonder about is, could it be that we've given our driving need to accumulate wealth, status, security, and success such power that it consumes not only our lives, but bit by bit, it consumes our souls as well? And if you think so, then it should come as no surprise, really, that across college campuses these days, the most well-attended classes are not ones that teach students how to be successful, but rather how to live a good life, which they define as how to be happy. And I wonder when it is that we have had to start teaching young people how to be happy. What research shows is that in addition to fairly simple things in our lives, like enough sleep, a healthy diet, and sustaining meaningful relationships, a key factor that contributes to our happiness is the sense of gratitude we get when we engage in random acts of kindness. We are far happier when we gratefully share what we have with others. Indeed, Benedictine monk David Steindl-Rast, founder of a network for grateful living, speaks of the anatomy and practice of gratitude as full-blooded, reality-based, and redeeming. It is not happiness that makes us grateful, he notes. It's gratefulness that makes us happy. Those of us preoccupied with calculating the dollar amount of a fare balance might not realize that Paul also speaks in this passage about something far more valuable than money. And I don't want to make money not important, because when Rob Isham stands up and gives the stewardship stuff in October, I don't want you to tell him that I told you it wasn't important. That's not the deal, right? But read that passage again, because Paul writes about giving generously from our hearts with an eagerness that matches our means and a genuine love. In other words, we are to share from our abundance not merely as a duty or an obligation, but as a joy and a privilege entrusted to us by God, and with the expectation that we are not only the givers, but will be recipients of a gift those we serve offer us, both of our lives being changed in the moment. Truly, I would say to you that for many of us, this is the more costly sum. Amen.